Servus and welcome to another episode of the Pro Hockey Pod, episode 36. Took a little break last week, was busy traveling this week. Happy to get back on. Another goalie. So obviously that gets me excited. Love talking to fellow goalies about their careers. This guy I got to see live last year a couple times, couple dubs. I mean, he didn't really lose, to be quite honest, last season in Castle there. But another guy that went the college route, had a lot of success, and now has transitioned over to Europe. Welcome to the podcast. Sorry, Jake Kielly.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. It's gonna be fun.
So we always take it back to kind of just how it started. I'm always interested talking to people, kind of how they got their start. You were born in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and just talk about your childhood and kind of growing up there.
Yeah, so I was actually born in Ajax. A lot of people don't know that about me. I'm a dually Canadian US, but we moved to Minnesota when I was like 3. So it's pretty much my hometown is pretty much Eden Prairie. Um, but yeah, I mean it was just one of those things. I'd always wanted to play hockey. My dad never got the opportunity. He was he grew up in a family with a little less means, so he was always a basketball player, baseball player. But he always loved listening to Montreal Canadiens games. He'd reenact them in his room on the radio. So he was probably pushing me into hockey when I was able to get the chance. But growing up in Minnesota, it's kind of a staple of life there that you give hockey a try at least, right? And as soon as I started playing, I just absolutely loved it, and kind of just right from the beginning wanted to be a goalie. I always knew like I hated having to go off the ice whenever you had to make a shift change, and whenever I went back out, I'd go right back towards the net. So it was one of those things. I think it was either goalie or bust. Like my dad never really tried to get me out of it. He just kind of pushed me into it whenever I was able to get the opportunity, just let me run with it. And then grew up playing youth sports in Eden Prairie. Just kind of kept working, had a lot of role models in Eden Prairie, got a lot of guys in a couple grades above me, like Nick Letty and Kyle Rouse playing North American Pro. A lot of these guys kind of led the way for guys like me to be able to come up and through. And yeah, just had you know, playing youth sports in Minnesota, or youth hockey in Minnesota is obviously an experience, but just got opened up to a lot and met some good goalie coaches along the way that kind of helped me get to each next level in my youth career.
A lot to cover there. First, I'm going to email elite prospects after this and tell them to figure it out. Get their facts right here. They made my research team look
Yeah.
not ready for this interview. But no,
Oh,
cool, man. I'm Ajax, not too far. I'm from Burlington, so that was about hour
yeah.
and 10 away, I believe.
Yeah.
So then your dad, as you said, like didn't obviously play, was more involved in basketball and stuff, but obviously was a Canadians fan, I believe you were saying. So did he, when you're watching hockey, I guess at a young age, is somebody you're watching, would Patrick Waugh still have been a Canadian back when you started, or?
Yeah. Yeah. I think he would have been like when he was watching, it was uh, honestly, I think it was Dryden maybe for him, like when he was young. For me, it might have been right towards the end of Waugh's time when he was with the Canadians. It might have been right around that time that he was done.
Yeah, just looking at it, I think you're right, because you're born in '96, and that was the
Yeah.
year that he got traded to Colorado and they won.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you would have seen after that probably Jocelyn Tebow or somebody. I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
remember
Yeah. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
else was there.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I was more of a Minnesota Wild, like Nicholas Backstrom, those guys. That was, the old Rolly, the goalie, Dwayne Rollison. He was,
Danny Fernandez, or
yeah,
who was
yeah,
it? Or
yeah, yeah.
Manny Fernandez. Manny
And
Fernandez, sorry.
exactly. Yeah. Those were the guys that I grew up watching, and they were, they were pretty fun to watch in their own regards.
I mean, Rolly went on to have a long, long career, and
Yeah.
obviously had that stint there with Edmonton that one year. But
Mhm.
back to you. So you said like you kind of became a goalie because you didn't really want to get taken off the ice, which is an interesting way to put it. That way you're always on the ice. But
Yeah.
do you think like too, like kind of your dad coming from a different background in terms of like sports, that it kind of allowed you to kind of have a more athletic base as a young kid, like starting out?
100%. 100%. That's something that I always, probably in the moment, I hated that he did to me with that. Like he always made me try every single sport. Like played football, I played baseball, played basketball, played hockey, I swam for a little bit. Like I did all these different things, did track and field for a little bit. He always kind of pushed me into those things, but I mean, I think he didn't know much about hockey, but he understood that if you wanted to be a good athlete, you had to be a really well-rounded athlete. And I always respected that about him because at the end of the hockey season, it was done. Like he would let me maybe do one-on-one goalie coaching once every couple of weeks, but he was like, once the hockey season's done, go play baseball, go do lacrosse if you want to do lacrosse, just play something other than hockey because you need to be a more well-rounded athlete if you want to, go a long way in whatever you do.
I mean, your dad's a smart man and wise words. Like I've had so many guests on this pod that have said the same thing. Like, what would they recommend kids or things they see today? And they said, kids today, it's 12 months, 7 days a week hockey focus. And, we try to express to them, hey, like, multi sports is better. Like, have your hockey season, as you said, like in the summer, I think it's a little different for goalies. Like, you do obviously need the odd like goalie session in the summer to slowly get back into it before you go to like camps or training and stuff like that. But
Yep.
to play other sports, like baseball, obviously for goalies, good for reaction. Swimming, as you said, when you did that, that obviously would have been good for probably like cardio and other forms of like cardiovascular activity. So no, definitely good advice by your dad. Obviously, that helped you out along the way. And then, so how did your like minor hockey structure go? As I told you off camera, like, for me as a Canadian, we have a structure where it's basically, every town for the most part has like triple A, double A, single A. You have kind of a league you play in, what with made up of teams, and then you have a couple tournaments every year, and then there's like a playoff format. But how was it for you out there in Minnesota? Obviously, the high school hockey is very big, but before we
Yeah,
get to that, like how's the minor hockey system?
it's pretty similar. It's like you start actually really competing against other teams in fourth grade, and that was the squirt level. So fourth and fifth grade is a squirt level, sixth and seventh grade was Pee Wee, and then eighth and ninth was the Bantam level. And at each tier, at least when I was going through, I think now maybe it's a little bit different, but there's like an A team, maybe two B teams, two B2 teams, a couple C teams, and each level would play against each other. But sounds pretty similar to what you played in up in Canada.
And I'm assuming it was very competitive because, as you said, Minnesota is a hockey state.
Yeah.
That's obviously, I believe, one of their number one sports that they really take pride in
Mhm.
being, a hockey state. So,
Yep.
how was your like season and stuff structure? Like, how many teams were in your league per se?
Yeah, we didn't really I can't really remember. I don't really think we did much of a league because we had I mean, we would just play teams all over Minnesota. So I mean, we probably played in youth hockey. I mean, squirts because we were a little bit younger, maybe 50 games a year. But then you get to Peewees and Bantams, and we were probably close to 60, 70 games between tournaments and then our in-season play. But I mean, I guess we would have, I think they just ranked teams um, kind of based on what people saw. And then at each level, you had like your division because squirts there was really no playoffs. You just did tournaments and then regular season just played a bunch of teams around the area. Pewees they had the state championships for that age group, and you kind of go with like your division, so kind of teams around your area. Then you go to regionals, which you play more teams from around different areas of Minnesota, and then the state final I think ultimately was 8 teams. um, and obviously you kind of just you knock teams off as you went up. But that was kind of really how it was. I mean, you to get through divisionals, you might have needed 7 or 8 games to get through when I was going through, and then regionals was 3 or 4 games, and then the state tournament was 3 games pretty much.
And then is it so like do you get to basically a certain age and then it's in Canada, like as I said, you get to like minor midgets, like your draft, your CHL draft year, and then you basically have 2 years of midget, and then after that, it's you're either going to junior or you're playing high school hockey. Where in Minnesota, it seems like as soon as you get to high school, like a lot of kids are transitioning from kind of that minor hockey to high school. Like, are both teams still there? Like, is there the option to play minor hockey as well, or does it stop and it's like, hey, like more focusing on high school hockey, like that's the
Yeah.
next step.
Yeah. Some teams, the high school that I went to, we really didn't do this a whole lot, but I think you can play high school from 8th grade on, maybe if you want to, like if they want to bring you on, I think that you can play for them. But for us, my high school, they didn't do that. So we got to 9th grade, you play your last year BAM, and then you go straight into the high school system. And for high school, you'd have like your varsity team, which is kind of the top team. There was a JV team. And then after that, there was another, it was called Junior Gold. But that was a lot like the way that the youth program was structured with the league games and then regionals and state. And that was, that's for any ages from 10, 11 to 12, or grades 10, 11, and 12. Um, but yeah, it's always kind of a gray area. Like some teams will bring their guys up early, and some wait till they hit 10th grade, and then that's kind of when they start up and they start playing high school. But then from there, you got the varsity, JV, and junior gold after that.
Were you because obviously another thing that I just kind of researching I saw like you were drafted to the USHL at a pretty young age, I believe
Yeah.
like 13, 14-ish. Like,
Yeah.
and you hadn't even played the
Hmm.
high school hockey yet. Like you'd just been playing your minor hockey. Like, is that pretty common for a USHL draft, or were you just kind of one of the kids that stood out at a young age?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both. I had a really good youth career when I was growing up. Like I won a state championship when I was in Bantams, which was a pretty big deal. And then I also, I mean, it was kind of 50-50 that. And then I had some pretty good connections. Like my goalie coach at the time, he was really connected to a lot of teams. He knew the head coach of the team I got drafted to, but at that time the USHL they did like the futures draft. I'm not sure if they still do it now, but usually back then they had a futures draft, which each team, I think there was up to like 90 players drafted, but they were all kids right around my age. So like you said, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. Then they'd have their main draft for guys that were older than that. I don't know if around my age there might have been one or two other guys from Minnesota who got drafted in that futures draft, but I think it was more of a scouting ground for AAA, like in Michigan, New York, Boston, out east kind of. It wasn't really, I don't think it was super common for Minnesota guys because it was just too early to tell.
And then like so basically that futures draft, so you get drafted, and then like is there a like a 3-year window or something where they have your rights, and if you end up not coming to make the team or whatever, then you're basically a free agent?
Yeah, I think it was 5 years because I had ended up making the team after my fifth training camp. And if I didn't make it after that, I think that I would have been able to go where I wanted to.
It's pretty cool that they do that. Like you don't hear
Mhm.
of like obviously the WHL like their draft is pretty early. I think it's at 15. OHL is normally 16, but even that like 13, 14 years old, like that's a real we're predicting what this guy can be in 5 year kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I know. Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about it, but at the same time it just shows that you got a level of trust from, a group above you, and kind of gives you something to work for too as well. Like I remember the first time I went to one of those camps, I was going in as probably a 14, 15-year-old. And I was going against 20-year-old guys, and that was like the biggest jump I'd ever had in my youth career at any point. And I felt like I was playing against men at that point. I'm swimming in the deep end when I get out there on the ice. I'm like, what am I looking at? But then it was, I had something to work for all the time. I was, constantly trying to get to the level that they were at. And, finally after a couple of those camps, I ended up making it. But yeah, I felt like I was in the big boys, the big boys pool at that point.
I had this conversation with somebody way back, and it's so funny. Like, I remember that too. Like, when we were like, 15, 16 years old and skating with 20-year-olds, we're like, oh my God, these guys are men. Like, they have beards, they're all big, jack. But then I felt when we got to that age, like, you didn't feel like that person, like,
Yeah.
reflecting to them, like, thinking, like, I'm 20 years old, I'm skating with a 16-year-old. Like, does he look at me like I used to look at, in the reverse scenario, or is it just times have changed?
100%, 100%.
But that's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of back to your career there before we make the jump to junior there. So you end up playing 1 year in the Minnesota high school league, and then after that, you end up going to Victoria Honda, which is
Yep.
a AAA under 18 team. So what was the reasoning behind that? Like kind of leaving the high school route in Minnesota and going to Victory Honda, and like how was your season structure there? Was there like a lot of tournaments, or did
Yeah.
you guys have like a regional kind of loop as well?
Yeah, so it was in Minnesota high school hockey, you only played 25 games at the time and maybe a max of 31, I think, if you made it to like the last game of the year in the state championship or the third place game, something like that, right? Um, and so the year my sophomore year, I ended up playing varsity, and split most of my time. I think I might have played 13 games and the other guy played 12 um, at that time. And just for a goalie's development, it's not ideal when you're playing, basically a dozen games. For goalies, you kind of just need to see a lot. You got to see a lot of games. The high school season didn't really start until right around this time. So it just felt like you were missing out on a lot. And then the goalie that I had split time with, he was coming back again for his senior year. And he had played well when he came in last, or the year that we played together, he had played well. So I just kind of thought, for me personally, I had this opportunity to go to a team that was really good. They had a really solid structure with Victory Honda. Their coach was pretty well renowned for his ability to develop players. He had actually coached at Bowling Green for a season, so he had college coaching experience, and he was coming back to U18 AAA. It just wasn't really something a lot of guys did. Um, and I just felt it was a better opportunity for me to get more games. I knew that I wanted to play junior hockey, play college hockey. So it was something that I felt like I needed to do, because I felt like if I stayed at Eden Prairie for another season, my kind of development would get stunted a little bit. And I probably wouldn't take as many strides as if I played a 70 game season like we pretty much ended up doing. I think we played 81 games the next year in Victory Honda. Um, but it was just, for me personally, it was just a better decision. And um, it ended up working out pretty well for me, but it just, it all came back to that development. I got kind of thrown into the fire and had to kind of sink or swim at that level, playing so many games. But at AAA, it was more. We actually ended up going all the way to the national championship. We lost to Shattuck that year, and we lost to Little Caesars in the Michigan State championship. So it was kind of a, we kind of had a runners up year, but it was a lot of tournaments. And then we did kind of have like a little regionals, um, or like the Michigan State tournament was, that was, I want to say, maybe 6, 7, 8 games to when you get to the championship. And then I believe the nationals was based on national rankings and like some point system that they do, um, based on your wins and tournament record and stuff like that. And we ended up getting into that.
Well, you brought up a good point. Just kind of like as a goalie, like for your development, like you want to play games, and um, I'm happy that you end up finding a team, that it worked out. We're end up playing
Yeah.
almost 70 games as a team, which is obviously tremendous and kind of, pro like in a sense at an early
Yeah.
age. One thing I always ask, and at this age, I believe you're kind of around that 17, 18 years old. You mentioned before, you had dreams of, playing in the USHL and then eventually going to college. Had there ever been thought of the other side? Obviously North Americans grow up with the CHL, so I'm not sure for Minnesota what one of the three would be more common there. But had there ever been any talks like go to any camps or anything like that? Or
Yeah. Yeah. So I Minnesota, I think, is the dub. I'm pretty sure. I think we could only get drafted into the WHL when you're kind of at that age. Um, and I had talked to Lethbridge at the time about potentially going to play for them. That was right at the time. I don't know how many games they played, but they won maybe like a handful and lost 50, 55 games. So it's kind of going into a little bit of a weird situation there. And they were just super, super brief talks. But I'd talked to my parents, and they really wanted me to go the college route. They knew that hockey could be short, and they wanted me to get my degree. So they really nudged me in that direction. But at the same time, they respected my decision either way. They did the same thing with Victory Honda, but they basically told me, they're like, Jake, if you want to go the WHL route, you need to tell them yes or no, and you got to commit to it. And as soon as you commit to it, you can't go back on that. Um, and lucky, like, it ended up working out for me to go the college route. I think it was probably the right way for me to go. I needed that extra development time, but it was just kind of one of those ones. I had a path that I had to pick. I could go one way or go the other, and I just ended up deciding to go the North American route or the US route.
I've said it like many times. It's such a hard decision, I feel like, at such a young age. And also that you could technically go NCAA and play a year and then go, yeah, this isn't for me. And then you could go back to the OHL or WHL, whereas you can't do the other if you realize like, oh, this isn't the road I want to go. And I've always said that's
Yeah,
kind of unfair for, I think, young athletes. And hopefully one day they figure out a solution there, maybe make a rule of some sort where it could work both ways. But
yeah, 100%.
it seems like in your career, like you kind of took steps every year. So, after this year in Victory Honda, you end up going to the Austin Bruins are in the NAHL, which is another good junior league in
Hmm.
the States.
Hmm.
Um, did you feel that, every year you were just taking a step kind of as a goalie and, kind of crafting your skills, and this was allowing you to, make jumps every year without, having, I would say like an adjustment period or a year where it's like, okay, I need to figure this out, and then next year I'll come back stronger. But it seemed every year
Yeah.
you just kind of jumped into it, and, it was like, all right, let's go, next challenge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's exactly like you hit the nail on the head with that. When I always look back on my career, it's just like I felt like I was just climbing the ladder, just like one step at a time. I kind of just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept chugging along. I think in the moment there was definitely frustration, like because I had gotten drafted by Tri Cities so early. I really wanted to go there as soon as I was ready. They weren't ready for me, and I definitely wasn't ready for them. But it was one of those things. Every place that I ended up going, I learned different things about myself. I had really good coaches along the way the entire time who pushed me in different ways. They always seemed to get the best out of me. I'm super lucky for the coaches that I did have. But yeah, it was just kind of like just stepping up the ladder, kind of one rung at a time. And ultimately for me, that was the best because I think if I would have went, straight to the USHL right away, I probably would have sunk and, who knows where I'd be now. If I would have stayed at high school, I honestly don't know if I would have left high school and been able to play juniors anywhere because I don't know if my development would have gone um, the way that it had, the way that I went. But yeah, it was one step at a time, just kind of keep chugging along. And to be honest with you, in the moment, like there's frustration at times, absolutely. But then once I got to the level, I think I realized that I was in a really good spot and I just had to keep working, just keep grinding, just keep sticking to my game, learning more about myself. And I think at each level, I ended up doing a pretty good job of that.
That's a really important quality, I would say. And including myself, it's people, they can't always grasp that. Like you said, like you have a goal ahead, and like, you'd been drafted so early for Tri City, and in your head, you're like, okay, like, is next year going to be the year? Am I finally going to make it? But you still were able to, with making steps each year in your career before getting the USHL, for example, when you went to Austin, like you still were able to focus and be like, hey, like I'm in a good spot. I'm progressing. This is the next great opportunity for me, get
Mhm.
to work with different people, play with different guys, and then still had that eventual goal, in the back of your mind, but you didn't let it like distract you. You didn't be negative thinking like, oh my God, here's another year where I'm not in Tri City, and it's, I feel
Yeah.
like some athletes, as hard as they try to stay positive, they only can see the negative of like, is this ever going to change? Am I ever going to make it kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's there's always going to be levels of frustration in sport, unless you make it to the ultimate peak of the NHL. But even when you get there, I'm sure that there are guys who are frustrated with the roles that they're playing in. But at the end of the day, you kind of just got to keep, just putting your nose to the grindstone, just keep going, just keep working. You just got to kind of push it out once you get to a certain point and just realize the situation you're in is the situation you're in, and you just got to keep going, kind of keep working and learn your lessons along the way.
It's a good philosophy, sorry, to have for sure. And then obviously, that 2015-16 season, you end up, reaching your goal there. I believe it was, 5 years after getting drafted there. You get to play in Tri City, and I've told many people in terms of junior leagues, tier two junior leagues in North America, that's probably the top one,
Mhm.
especially in the US. Even when it comes to North America, I would say it's probably top, and then maybe behind it's like the BCHL in Canada. Like that's obviously a tier league. But how was your experience there? Like obviously it's you're playing in arenas with kind of like major junior, like fans every night, kind of the same schedule with travel and everything. Like how was that for you?
I loved my time in Tri-City. It was phenomenal. Like I got super lucky. So I had seen from the time I got drafted in Tri-City, I'd seen three head coaches at Tri-City. The first one who actually drafted me ended up being my assistant coach at Clarkson down the road, which was kind of a funny coincidence, but we'll get to that at some point. But the third coach I ended up with, he was just a really good dude. He put together two really good assistant coaches. We got really lucky. We had an assistant coach there, Taylor Nelson. He was pretty fresh off of his playing career. He was a goalie, so we ended up having a goalie coach as an assistant coach, and he was also the D coach. So it helped me a lot because I was able to have eyes on me every single day, and he was putting together goalie skates for us. So from that aspect, like that was huge. Um, Tri City, it was my first year out of high school, so I kind of had to learn to live on my own a little bit. And we just had a really good group of guys. Again, another year where I learned a lot about myself, but I learned a lot that year about being a good teammate because I actually went into training camp and I wasn't. They brought in a couple other guys to kind of compete for that spot. They ended up, either leaving or getting asked to leave. And it just kind of things fell into place for me to end up taking over and playing a lot of games. But yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned that year, but being a good teammate was definitely up there with one of them. And it was overall just a really, really good year.
Taylor Nelson, I remember him from college. Like he was around my time. I
Yeah.
remember they did like a 24/7 too, and I remember watching him on at like his school. So
Mhm.
that's funny. I'm glad he's in coaching now. Just searching kind of through the teams you were on in junior, it was kind of funny. I didn't realize this until now, but um, there was a guy that seemed to kind of follow you, or you follow him everywhere you went. A German guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Nico there, Sturm. Like you guys play together in Austin, then you play together in
Yeah.
Tri City, then you both go to Clarkson. So,
Mm.
um, yeah. So, was he just kind of taking you everywhere with him, or was it you taking him everywhere with you?
It was like a happy coincidence. It was kind of the two of us going along for the ride because I had been with Tri City for a little bit. In Austin, we weren't super tight because he was out of high school by that point. So I hung out with more of the high school guys, and then I don't know, the draft was in February, March or something. He got drafted to Tri City, and we just started bonding pretty tightly after that. And then, the next year we went to camp together. We both made it, and then we ended up being roommates actually, while we were in Tri City, and then ended up rooming and living together for 3 years while we were at Clarkson. But it was kind of just one of those ones where things fell into place to end up going there. But he'll probably end up being my best man at my wedding this summer. So me and Nico, we're pretty tight. We go back a long way.
It's good to have somebody like that. So, and
Yeah,
who'd have thought it was a German? So,
I know, I know. He's got a crazy story. I'll tell you that. He was a bad tryout away from not even from going. He was about to go back to Germany to play and just go home and see what was going to happen. And now he's making a pretty good contract in San Jose and doing his thing, playing pretty well. So I'm happy for him.
hopefully down the road he doesn't forget who his great roommate was. So,
Exactly. I got to remind him of it every once in a while.
um, yeah, but back to kind of before you end up going to college there, as you mentioned, I'm curious, when you're having this year in the USHL, um, you're playing, it's your 19 turning 20-year-old season, so you still had one more year of eligibility.
Yep.
Um, but how was the process for you? Like, were you talking to a lot of schools? Like, was there a lot of interest, or was it just, for example, Clarkson, where you ended up choosing, like they just came out and really showed interest and wanted you there, so you've kind of felt, okay, this is my choice? Because as I said, you still did have another year,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
some guys are, want to wait. Maybe there was a goalie, especially in college. Like you almost have to time it. Like as goalies, you kind
Hmm.
of have to be like, hey, like when I went to college, the guy that I was taking was spot was a senior, so I knew like the next year it was battle of the next guys because he had
Yeah.
graduated kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So it was just it was a lot of fortunate things that kind of just fell into place. So I really, because I think I had committed pretty early in that season. So I was playing pretty well at that point, but I wasn't having the year that I eventually ended up having. And I was really only talking to two schools at that time, and it was Clarkson and one other. Um, and like I said, the head coach who was in Tri City, who originally drafted me, he was the assistant coach at Clarkson at the time, and they really wanted me. And Nico had committed the year before when he was in Austin, so he was obviously rooming with me. He really wanted me to go to Clarkson, so he was in my ear at the same time. The coaching staff was in my ear at the same time, and at a certain point, I mean, they had talked to me. Um, I think I went on a visit, or I don't even actually think I went on a visit at first, but they were talking to me, and the assistant coach who was at Tri City before basically told me, he's like, "Hey, I don't have a lot of time to sit around and wait." He was like, "If you come in next year, which is what we want you to do, you'll probably end up being our guy, and we're letting you know that right now." He was like, "It's a good opportunity. It's a great school. You'll get your degree, and we'll have your back, but we need to know soon. Like, we got to make a decision here." So I think he gave me like 24 hours. He's like, "In 24 hours, I need to know what you want to do." And so I was talking to my parents, and they, like I said, they really wanted me to get my degree. They wanted me to get it from a good school, and luckily, again, they were kind of a decisive factor in the whole thing. They really forced me into, or not forced me, they kind of pushed me into it. They were like, "Jake, this is a great opportunity for you." And just like you said, it was kind of one of those ones. They had a goalie leaving at the time who had played a lot. The coach had told me that, if I come in, work hard, do my thing, I have a good chance of playing a lot of games for him. So I just kind of ended up trusting the process. I liked that coach a lot. If Nico had committed there, I knew it was a good school. Um, I liked everything that they were doing, the program that they were building. Um, it just seemed like they had a really good culture, and things just ended up working out. I went on a visit a little bit later and loved every second while I was at Clarkson. And it was just kind of a funny way to go about it, because I just had one guy in my ear in my own house. So every single day I was getting it from him. And then I had the coach telling me, "We need you, like, in a day, we gotta have your answer." And ended up working out.
Nico's just dressing up every day in Clarkson green and yellow clothing.
Yeah, exactly. He's got his hoodie on. He brings it out. He's like, "You want to come here? You gotta come
Looks
here."
good, eh? Looks good, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
I played is a touchy term. I sat on the bench once at a game in Clarkson because
Yep.
we played there. Holy shit, man. Like, what a loud goal horn. I remember the first time when they came
Yep.
on the ice, it scared the shit out of me. Like, I
Yep.
jumped. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. But something about that division, like even like Union and RPI, like they had loud ones too. But obviously you guys had a very good fan support there, like packed rink every night. But
Mhm.
what was the campus like? So for someone that hasn't been there, kind of what was the campus town kind of experience like, the whole college experience, as we say?
Yeah. So Clarkson, it's like it's in Potsdam, New York, so it's upstate New York. I absolutely loved it. Like, it's kind of cottage country up there. There's not really a big downtown. Campus is really nice, but it's pretty small, and the school is only about 3,500 undergrads. So it's not a very big school, and it's mainly an engineering school. But I absolutely loved it. Like, I really liked the small school atmosphere. I just was able to get to know a lot of my non-hockey business class peers. Like, I got to know a lot of them. Um, we got to know our teachers really well. You know, we got a lot while we were on campus. A lot of support. Like, I ended up having a pretty good relationship with the president of the school at the time. Like, that's something, if you go to a Big Ten school or you go to a bigger school, there aren't many people who can be on a first name basis with the president of their school. So I actually ended up loving every second of it. And we obviously spent a lot of time at the rink, and we had great facilities and stuff there. And the hockey was kind of the main focus for me. But overall, I mean, it was a really good school. They have a great business school, great engineering school, great hockey programs all around. So it's not for everybody, that's for sure. Like, I knew some guys who would come there and they left after 1 year because they just couldn't do the small school feel. But I loved every second of being there.
I'm also a small kind of town guy. I prefer that. I think it's cool atmosphere. You know, the town really comes around your athletic programs, I would say. I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
that Potsdam University, like the D3 team that I used to play against, is probably close there. It's in the same town, I'm
Yeah,
assuming. But
yeah.
it's crazy they could have two teams in the same
I
small
know. Well,
town.
so we had SUNY Potsdam, that was 5 minute drive down the road. Clarkson, St. Lawrence was 20 minutes down the road, and then they had SUNY Canton. That was right by St. Lawrence. So we had like these four big hockey programs within 20 minutes of each other.
Pretty cool. I mean, I guess if
Yeah.
you're a local, you know, you can pick which game you're going to every night. So
Exactly. Yeah, no, they draw it pretty well though. It's like you draw the line in the sand. You're either Clarkson fan or you're St. Lawrence fan. There's no in between.
one of my buddies went to St. Lawrence. I don't know, would he have been there when you were there? I don't think so. No, he wouldn't have been there when you were there. But yeah, talked about the rivalry. Obviously, couple of heated matches there. Speaking of obviously being in Clarkson, you know, being in a small town, um, there was another goalie at Clarkson who, you know, may or may not have won a couple natties. So I think I believe she's your fiance now. If I was to
Yeah.
bring it up, you know, in terms of goalie one and goalie two, you might be
Oh,
behind her in terms of the
I
college career.
I
But
am 100%.
like, how did you two meet? Obviously, you know, you guys would have been spending a lot of time at the rink at similar times, you know, with her team and your team. So how did you meet your now fiance?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with the women's team in general. Just some guys knew them, knew a lot of the girls from back home. And we had a lot in common, obviously being the two hockey teams on campus. So we just ended up spending a lot of time, and we met at an extracurricular activity on a weekend. And we kind of just started talking ever since then. And then she got me into a whole lot of trouble one day when we were lifting. She might have ended up getting me bagged for an hour. So if she comes on, you'll have to ask her about that story. That was a lot of fun. And we kind of just met and started talking, and we share a lot of common interests, and we we get along really well, and met each other while we were having fun at school, and one thing led to another. We started dating, and here we are almost 7 years later.
I believe I mean, if you met the first year, I'm just speaking out loud, but she would have been a junior and you would have been a
Yep.
freshman. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to hear your side of the story because there's always two sides. So let's hear yours of how you were bagged for an hour because of Shay here, and then I'm gonna ask her if I get her on hopefully next time and see
Yeah.
if the stories line up here.
Okay. She We had a pretty strict strength coach at the time. He's gonna be the officiant at her wedding. So it's pretty funny. We got a really strong connection with him now, but he uh he had a very strict no going out on the weekdays policy. It was just something he never wanted to do. So there was one Thursday night, I think in the fall, when Shay and I just started talking, and a bunch of like the whole men's team went out. So decided to go out. I kept myself in check. I will say that I didn't have too many. But I had a couple tequila shots, and then, the next day wake up, we got to go to the gym early, and she was out warming up for a workout that she was doing, or going on the ice or something like that. I walked by, and she knew that I was drinking the night before, so she she was like, "Oh, you smell like tequila." And then I was like, "No, no." She was like, "Yeah, you smell like tequila." I was like, "I can't do this right now. I can't be in the weight room with Tad breathing down my throat about it." And so I ended up going back in. Our strength coach, he ends up stopping the workout, calling us all out, asking who went out the night before. I raised my hand. I said that I went out the night before. I ended up having to do like 30-second assault bikes for the next hour, because me and another guy, the two who owned up to it. And funny thing afterwards, he had actually, he, I went up and I apologized to him. But after, he told everybody, he was like, "I didn't even think Jake was the one who went out. I had no idea. Like, I never would have guessed that." And it was all because Shay told me that I smelled like it. I never would have owned up to it if I didn't, but I didn't want everybody else in the weight room to get bagged at the time. And and that's how she got me in a whole lot of trouble.
Well, you're just clearly a team guy, and she seems to get you in a lot of trouble. So it seems like a good mix.
Exactly. Yeah. So don't let her get out of that when she comes on.
I'll try to bring that up.
Yeah.
Another thing I think is cool is, obviously as you said, you're both goalies. So how was the dynamic like, after a weekend? Like, are you two critiquing each other's games? Like, kind of like, like would she see like a game from you and be like, hey, like, what were you doing on that first one there? Like, because I,
Yeah.
I thought, like, funny enough, we talked about Bitzer off camera,
Yeah.
and Bitzer obviously is also married to a goalie,
Mhm.
Britt, who did really well in college as well. And she, like, sometimes he would tell me in the morning, like, after a game, like, she would
Yeah.
ask him about what he was doing on some goals, and I would just die laughing because I'm like,
That's
man, you got me breathing down your neck as the goalie coach, and then you go
yeah.
home and your wife is giving it to you too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we at the time we didn't really talk hockey too much. We had enough in common that, I don't think either of us after a good game or bad game, we didn't really want to talk about it all that much. We'd obviously go watch each other every time, every chance that we could, but we weren't really critiquing each other per se. There was a couple times in the summer too where we would skate together, the men's and women's team who were in town, and I tried to stay away from that as much as possible because we're both competitive people. So we'd end up playing cross ice with mixed men's and women's team. And then we did it one time in the summer. And I think I beat Shay a couple games and she was not very happy about it. I don't think she talked to me for a couple days. So we started to steer away from that for a while. But no, we don't do too much. It's honestly nice, like having somebody who knows what you're going through all the time, because being goalie is an extremely unique position, both mentally, physically. There's a lot that goes into it. So having somebody in your corner who knows what's going on, if you have a tough game, like especially now because Shay is she's kind of packed it in, so she gets good enjoyment out of coming to watch our games and stuff. And she'll come off and she'll be like, "Do you want to talk about it today?" And if I say no, then she just lets it be. And if we start talking, then we start talking. But it's nice to have somebody in your corner who knows what you're going through.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously now, as you said, like, she's kind of following you on your journey, and
Mm.
there's no strength coach anymore to get mad at her if she drinks on a weeknight. So,
Exactly. I know.
um, I noticed, like, throughout, you obviously had a very good college career. Great would be probably a better word. 3 years there of just consistent, solid numbers. You won some awards too in college. I also forgot to mention, because we got off topic, you also won the USHL Clark Cup. So sorry for that, but
No
a
worries.
guy that's been able to win some things, I would say, which is awesome. But after that kind of third year there, you
Mm.
mentioned before, like, your parents always kind of talk to you, we want you to get your school done. So after your junior year there, what's kind of going through your head? Like, are you getting a lot of interest, with your advisor, I'm assuming, from NHL teams, and you kind of have to kind of make another decision? Or was it something where you actually had, for example, done the school and you were done anyway, so you were ready to
Yeah.
move on?
Yeah. So it was actually another one of those goals for me. Like the ultimate end game with juniors was the USHL for me. But one of the goals that I had at school was to put myself in the best situation possible so that I could sign a pro contract after my junior year if I wanted to. My goal was kind of always to do 3 years at school, and if I had the option to, then sign my contract and go try to play pro. Um, so yeah, I'd kind of grinded some summer classes along the way, taking an extra class or two some semesters just to try to get my credits where they need to be. Ultimately, I only had maybe 2 or 3 classes left to take, but they were all elective, so they're pretty easy to get knocked off. I'd done all my business degree. Um, and so then it was ultimately just if teams were interested and wanted to sign me and I had some interest the previous years, like after my freshman year, I had a couple teams. After my sophomore year, I had a couple teams, but I felt like what we were doing at Clarkson was more special and more personal to me than going pro. And then after our junior year, like Nico was talking to some teams too. He ended up signing, and I just thought it was a good time for me. But I had two teams interested: Vancouver, who I ended up signing with, and then Pittsburgh was another team who was interested in me. And Vancouver gave me the opportunity to burn my year, so I would be able to go up to, just with my age at that time, I was able to sign a 2-year contract. But if I went up to the NHL team, it'd burn a year off that contract. Then I'd have the next year available to me to play, and then I'd be up for a contract after that. So that's ultimately what I ended up doing. Pittsburgh just offered me 2 years, but it would have been, the following year and then one more. And my advisors at the time thought it'd be a better idea for me to burn that year, go to Vancouver, experience what it was like, and then get into my training camp, get a year under my belt, and then see what happens after that.
It's a cool, kind of, I'm sure, process to go through, but also it's cool that you can do that. Like you can kind of burn a year.
Hmm.
Um, in Vancouver, obviously, good organization to get in with, especially then.
Hmm.
Um, Before we move on from college and talk about kind of your pro experience, there's one guy also I have to bring up who I coached for, I would say, 2 months, because the first year I kind of got shut down a little bit because of Corona, and then I wasn't there much. And then the second year, this guy decided to fight the last exhibition game and get his shoulder knocked out for the third time. I didn't get to play, but Kelly Summers. So I was with
Yeah.
him at Kermitchow.
Okay.
And I just have to say, like, what a good dude. Like, every day that guy had a smile on his face.
Oh
I
yeah.
obviously, the limited time I did see him play, I thought he was a very good defenseman. But how was calls with him? I'm sure he was a fun guy to do things with.
Oh yeah, I loved Kelly, man. He is a good time. I just remember like he would, everybody would be, we had like a big hot tub, cold tub. So it was like a jacuzzi in our trainer's room. And guys would be, I mean, it was a cold, cold tub. And I'd be like, I'd be getting in and I'm all rigid and can't get below my like hip line, and I don't want to go any lower. Everybody else is sitting in there like shaking and everything. And Kelly would just come running in and he'd do like a full polar dive straight into the cold tub, like splash everybody, jump up, and he would just be happy, go lucky. He'd have a smile on his face the whole time. And then yeah, he could send it pretty hard on a Saturday night. So I really enjoyed playing with Kelly. He was a good guy, great defenseman too. Like he was one of my more favorite defensemen to play with, because he was super smart on the ice, really skilled, fast, and he could lay the body. Like he had some big hits. And yeah, it's funny that you played with him because he's a good dude.
Yeah, as I said, like I saw him, like this was when I was coaching, and the first year I was there for 2 months, and then COVID kind of, there was no fans, so like it was just kind of a weird season. And then the second year got to work with him a bit, and then unfortunately he separated, I think, his shoulder for the third time. I'd have surgery for like the second time, and just end up missing the year. But yeah, great dude, and
Mhm.
definitely what you talked about as a player, the limited time I did see him, I definitely saw that as well, which is cool.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing I forgot to mention, which I think is really unique, is when you were in your junior year there at college, like you wore a letter,
Mhm.
and for some reason in hockey, it's rare for goalies to wear letters. I don't know if it's because you just can't have access to the refs as easily as a player to skate up to them at the red line, or
Yeah.
if they want to leave you alone. But kind of, how did that come about, and like what did that mean to you? Being a leader and wearing a letter for your team in college.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a huge point of honor for me. It was one of those things. I wasn't really expecting it going into my junior year. I think we did a team vote for the captains, and it was, everybody kind of picked me. And just like you said, goalies don't really get that opportunity very much. So the fact that my teammates and coaches believed in me enough to put a letter on my chest was something that was super, it was crazy to me, but something I took a lot of pride in. And it was just one of those things, I think, that as class, like our class was pretty influential on what was going on at Clarkson. I think as a class we did a really good job of kind of establishing a culture, um just establishing, the way things that we wanted to be done in the rink, in the classroom, everything like that. And it was kind of just a nice little representation of, that we were all putting in a lot of work to get us to where we wanted to ultimately go. But yeah, that was a huge thing for me because, as goalies, you kind of toe the line of, if you want to say stuff in the locker room, or you know, if you should say something, because, goaltending is such a different position from players. You don't actually know what they're going through, and vice versa. But being able to have that letter on my chest, it kind of just, told me that these guys trusted me, that, if I say something, it's not going to fall on deaf ears. They're going to listen to me, um, when I was able to. And, it was just, it was a huge source of pride for me that everybody kind of believed in me like that.
And what type of leader would you say you are? Like, are you a guy, kind of let your work ethic do the talking, play on the ice, or were you sometimes a vocal guy in the dressing room? Because as I said, goalies like sometimes, you leave them in their zone, like do you let them focus kind of thing. But like how was it for you being a leader?
Yeah, I think it was more a work ethic thing for me throughout the week. But kind of, toward during games, I've never really been a huge fan of people just saying that goalies should kind of just sit in their corner and do their own thing. From the back of the game, you get a really good perspective on what's going on, effort levels, compete levels, the way that things are being executed. You get a really good perspective on kind of the whole game in front of you, right? Um, and if you have a guy that has a good head on his shoulders, being able to kind of speak out and just say, hey, like this is what I'm seeing from the back. We kind of need to snap it in a bit here. Let's keep it going. We're doing a great job. So when it came to games, I could, be a little bit more vocal in between periods and stuff and just let some guys know. But it was definitely more of a work ethic thing, and then just holding everybody accountable. If somebody needed to be, reminded of something, or if maybe they weren't doing something, letting the other captains leave me with a guy, just have a one-on-one conversation and just kind of reel them back in. That was always a big one. So it was kind of a combination of a couple things.
Oh, that's good to hear. And it's a good perspective to have where, you know, if something needs to be said, you can obviously be the guy to do it too. Like it doesn't mean, you just be left alone as a goalie, as you said. So
Yeah.
that's cool to hear. And so back to you signing an NHL contract,
Mm.
obviously a goal of I would say every hockey player, not just to make it there, but to sign that first contract. Like, how was that experience for you? Looking down at that paper and seeing the NHL logo and signing it, and
Yeah.
then how was your adjustment to pro hockey? I would say that first year, because that first year for you
Mhm.
was right before all the shitstorm happened with
Yeah.
Corona. So, like, how was all that for you? I guess I would say.
Yeah, it was a massive learning curve. Like in my career, it was probably the biggest learning curve that I'd ever had, not jumping from juniors to college or high school to juniors. It was definitely going to pro. But I mean, yeah, those first couple weeks were kind of a whirlwind just because, you've been talking to these teams, you weren't really sure if it was going to happen, and then you end up signing a contract, then you're getting emails about flights out to Vancouver. You got to worry about getting your stuff. I'm like emailing my professors, asking them, about the work that I got coming up because I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks. And then you actually get out there and, you get in an NHL locker room and you're around these guys who are superstars in their own rights. And it was honestly just like it felt like it went by way too quick looking back on it. You're playing at these NHL arenas. I was able to go on a road trip with them and just seeing the way that they travel when they're there and all that stuff. It was honestly a really cool experience. And then, but at that point, like I showed up from day one, and it was the goalie coach wanted to get to work with me basically right away. He was like, "Nice to meet you. I'm happy, but let's get on the ice and let's get to work. Let's see what we're working with here." And we put in some long hours on the ice and doing video and stuff like that. So it was really cool in the sense that it felt quick. You achieved this lifelong dream, but then in a second, you're like, all right, got to snap it in. Time to go back to work. Time to start learning, basically, learning a whole new style of hockey because it's now pro. And then, yeah, like you said, that first year, so that was a really cool experience. Those couple weeks, and then that summer of training, just leading up to the next season. And the next season was, it was just it was a whirlwind in its own respect because you end up going to an NHL training camp, your first one, and then I got sent to Utica, so going to an American League training camp, and then ending up getting sent to the coast, um, doing their training camp and playing that whole year. It was yeah, it was kind of a crazy process all around.
And especially that first year, I wondered, like as you said, it was obviously a lot,
Mhm.
kind of getting your feet wet in all aspects. But was it ever frustrating for you at points because you were playing games in Kalamazoo there, and then you'd go up to Utica, and I know you only got in 2 games of action, but you still were able to put up good numbers. Like, was there ever a thought in your head, like, you know, why am I not getting more games this year? Like, was it maybe just kind of a numbers game where they had too many guys, above you, or like, how was that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was so one of the reasons why I ended up signing with Vancouver at the time was because they didn't have many guys in their system. I think at the time they had Markstrom, Demko were their 1 and 2 in Vancouver. And then I think that was the year that Mikey DiPietro, Mikey, my good buddy, he ended up going up and playing his first NHL game that year because I think they had Richard Bachman at the time, but he had just had a pretty bad injury, so he was out. And then I think outside of that, they really didn't have much in their system. So they were pretty down on numbers. And then that offseason, they ended up signing Zane McIntyre, um, me, Richard Bachman came back. They drafted a kid, and then Mikey was coming back. So I think we had 7 goalies throughout the entire system. So it was just kind of, you could kind of see the writing on the wall. And then they ended up trading Zane. I think Baki took a step back in the American League, and then it was just me and Mikey when I got called up. But yeah, it was definitely frustrating at times. When you sign your NHL contract, you think, naturally you're just a young, immature kid. You think that you're just going to be, I obviously didn't realize I was going to, or think I was going to crack Vancouver's lineup with Markstrom, who was playing out of his mind at the time. And then Demko was an up and coming star. Um, I never would have thought that, but I thought at least I would have been in the American League. So when I got sent down to the ECHL, it was a little bit of a humbling experience as well. And it was frustrating for sure. Like even when I got to the ECHL, I was playing with Jake Hildebrand. Like he's in Berlin right now. He was in Frankfurt the last couple of years. He's a phenomenal goalie too. Like everywhere he goes, success just follows him. And so I was splitting time with him in Kalamazoo, and I was just like, I expected to come into pro and play 60 pro games, but I'm splitting with Hildy and Kalamazoo, and then I go up and I got Mikey, he was probably 19 or 20 at the time, and he was lighting it up in the American League. He was having a really good time. So it was kind of one of those ones I was frustrated, but at the same time, these guys were having really good years, and I knew that they were really good goalies. So I was kind of just biding my time and sticking to my process and hoping that my time would eventually come.
As a goalie, there's really, there's one position, like
Mm-hmm.
there's one net, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you just mentioned some good guys. Obviously, Hildebrand, I know well from the Dell too, and then now obviously in the DL, had a very good career. And then DiPietro was a high prospect back then. Then you obviously had Demko and Markstrom in the NHL. And even though Bachman was hurt, like he was a long time, I would say, like always that third guy, like could play NHL games, but could take your the AHL games as well.
Yep.
So when you were in Kalamazoo, though, just a quick shout out to these two guys that I know. You were with Austin Farley there, who obviously was
Yeah.
on this podcast a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, and then another guy, an Oakville guy, so a town over from me, Kyle Blaney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Skated with that guy a lot.
Yeah.
For such a small guy, that guy has a freaking unreal shot, like just
Yeah.
zings it. But
Yeah. He would make me so mad in practice. He could just score, man.
just a born scorer.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you now too is, as we said, that's kind of when Corona was coming in there. So the next 2 years are, frustrating to say the least, because, there's some teams you don't know if they're playing. Then that means more guys are going for similar spots, kind of stuff like that. But like, how was that? I always ask guys who did this, like, how was that grind for you? Because it is a grind, like that ECHL,
Mhm.
AHL grind, because it's not, once you get the NHL, it's the glamour. Like you've
Yeah.
made it, you're treated like gold. And then in the lower leagues, it's obviously, kind of like a cattle farm. Like the door is always open, like guys are coming in and out. So how was that for you, especially during Corona, those next 2 years?
Yeah. It was just like a changing time. I don't know. It was weird. It was, because at college, your team's your team. You're really not moving many guys. You know who your prospects are coming in, like your class that's going to come in. Same thing with juniors. We really didn't have much movement at all. And when there was movement, you could kind of see the writing on the wall. It wasn't, this moving one guy here or there. But yeah, once you get to the ECHL, you realize it's kind of a different beast. It feels like every week you got different guys coming in. Injuries are happening left and right. I think at one point during that year in Kalamazoo, we had a full line of, I mean, you only have 10 forwards in the ECHL. We had a full line of defensemen plus one. So you're basically playing with six forwards and then 4D up front and then 6D on the back end. So it was just like, you just kind of have to be adaptable. You have to be moldable. You're playing a lot of games in a short amount of time. That was something that was different for me. At college, I was used to playing Friday, Saturday nights. So I got pretty good at playing back to backs. But then, when you have to go on the bus on Thursday, you play it in a spot on Friday. And in Kalamazoo, that division is just kind of a beast because all the teams are close enough that they put them in, you know, the next day you're playing a different team. You're not making like weekend trips to one place. So then Friday after you're going on the bus, Saturday you're playing in a different city, and then you got on the bus. And Sunday, you're playing an afternoon game 4 hours away from where you were the night before. So it was just learning how to be not as set in my ways because at school I got pretty stuck into a routine and I knew kind of what I was able to do, what I was able to get away with, and you know there wasn't really much left to deviation. Um, so I just had to learn how to kind of be a little bit more moldable. And then everything with the coronavirus and the pandemic, like it was just a weird end of the season. I just played my first true American League game, played pretty well. I felt like I was getting into a rhythm with the team, which was something I hadn't been used to going into a new team in the middle of the year. I'd never done that before. So I felt like I was starting to get to know the guys, getting into my rhythm, playing pretty good hockey. And then just boom, like that, it's, the season's over and you got to figure out what to do next. And that summer was just a lot of training. But, the hard thing about that time was just like any athlete knows, it's, you're used to a certain amount of off season time. And then by the end of your off season, you're like, okay, I'm ready to start playing games again. I'm ready to do something meaningful. And when it just kind of got dragged out, dragged out, dragged out, it got hard to be training all the time and lifting constantly and trying to do whatever sort of cardio you could do at the time. It just got harder and harder to keep going. So when that call finally came that we were starting up, it was a pretty big sigh of relief.
That's one of the things, like for me personally too. There was 2 summers where I didn't sign until late, like, and I mean late, I mean like November.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that, man. Like you're doing everything, all the guys you work out with are gone, like they're at their teams. It's September, October, like the grind every day going, and in your head you're just kind of like, hey, like when's my agent gonna call me and tell me something's going on, or when's, in your instance, like when are we gonna hear the leagues back going on? And I always felt too like you're skating with, like, for me, I would skate with my local junior team,
Mm-hmm.
and you just feel like, not that the guys were, but like you could kind of be like, man, are they judging me? Like, are they thinking like I'm like a dust guy? Like I can't find a job. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like
Yeah.
you're playing mind games with yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
and then, obviously the relief of it starting up again is, or finding a team is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So after that last year there, your second time in Kalamazoo, I'll say, was the thought process, I want to go to Europe, I want to give it a try, because you end up signing in Castle
Yeah.
there in the Del 2, which is a very good team that wants to, trying to get promoted every year to go to the DL.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had actually, so that COVID year, when I went back to Utica, when we played that pandemic year, when I was there at the end of the season, I actually suffered a pretty bad knee injury. I tore my MCL, so I had a grade 3 MCL, which is the worst it can be, and then I tore 95% of my ACL. So it was kind of like a freak play. My defenseman at the time just got caught up with somebody, pushed somebody back on top of me, and my knee got caught underneath me, and it just kind of caved in a way that it shouldn't have caved. And my ligaments took the brunt of that. So that's when I ended up going back to Kalamazoo. It was pretty late. It was like in February because I got hurt in April, had surgery, obviously, and then needed about 9 months to come back from that. So I went back to Kalamazoo. And so the whole goal of me going, because I ended up in Straubing for the month of August, because they had Florian Bugel, and he was doing the World Juniors for Germany when it was in August that year. So they needed a goalie to come in and just do, just coming on a tryout basically. But, there was no tryout there. They just need somebody to come in and do training camp for him. So Nico's agent knew about my story and he's from Germany, heard about this opening in Straubing. So he called me up and just told me, this is a great opportunity. you can get your conditioning in, you can come back. I know everything that happened with your knee. You can come over here, get conditioned, go back, sign with the team in North America, but you'll be fully in shape. You'll be ready to go for the season. So I went to Straubing. Everything went pretty well there. Castle had a goalie at the time who had a knee injury. So they needed another guy to come in. They knew I was over there. They knew that my visa and everything was in process. So they reached out to my agent. One thing led to another. I went there on a couple-week tryout and then ended up signing my contract there. But so I really had no idea. I thought I was going to be going back to North America. I thought I'd end up in the coast somewhere, maybe on a 2A American League ECHL deal if I got lucky, but there's just nothing in North America. So I ended up going and taking this opportunity in Castle, and yeah, things ended up working out pretty well there. It would have been nice if we went up and we had won, but sometimes hockey just doesn't work out that way.
Well, one thing I will say about the Dell too is, there's only 4 imports
Mm-hmm.
allowed to play, and you can only have 6 licenses throughout the year. So being a guy that played, and I was fortunate to be an import goalie like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
teams really, it really is not like a risk, but it's, giving a card to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And I know the goalie that I got and heard, and I know, um, you had been playing well there. And, but then at the same time, they had planned in a sense with 4 player imports to start the year, and you end up being the 5th guy. So then it creates a rotation.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things like there's no Germans on the market. So they kind of had to get someone like yourself that they knew could play. And
Yeah.
obviously play you did. I mean, uh 22-1 on the season. How are you?
Yeah.
I'm pretty like, correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but did your only loss happen like at the start of the year? Because Castle started
Yeah.
slow, so I want to say you lost and then decided, okay, I'm gonna go 22-0 the rest of the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. It was in my first couple of games. It was just a weird shootout loss.
Must be nice. Hey, that's not a bad stat to put on the resume. Yeah, 22
Yeah.
and 1. How are you now?
Yeah. It was pretty good.
One thing I like to ask you about Castle is because obviously, as I said, they're a team that's trying to go up every year. Like they're probably the favorite every year in the Dell too. One of the 3 teams that can apply for the Dell license.
Yep.
When you were playing there, like, did you ever feel like pressure, like, or maybe some like outside pressure? I would say because like they obviously have a very big budget. They tried every year to put together a good team.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy of mine is actually the GM there, Hugo,
Yeah.
and I just wondered as a player, like, is it just a normal season for you, or did you kind of feel like kind of that outside pressure, like, hey, we got to win, kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I didn't feel too much pressure just because, like you said, I had a pretty good year last year. I was fortunate we ended up playing really well all the time. Jerry, my goalie partner, had a really good year last year as well. So there was really, it didn't feel like there was a ton of pressure, but at the same time, I'm not a big social media guy to begin with, but then when all the social media is in German and I don't speak German, you never know what people are saying. So that was kind of a nice thing. And then, if people are chanting stuff or whatever, talking to you outside the rink, most of the time you don't understand what they're talking about. So it just kind of worked out from a blocking it out perspective. Um, but yeah, there was definitely like down the stretch, when we got to playoffs, there was pressure. And it was just throughout the year, like organizationally, they obviously really want to move up. They always apply for that license. So organizationally, they added some pieces here and there and did what they felt that they needed to, but you could just tell from the inside that they really wanted to move up. And then when we kind of started to struggle in the semis, you could feel the building start to tighten up a little bit with the fans. I know I'd heard some stuff of what people were posting online just from some other guys in the locker room. And then, when we had gotten down pretty bad to Nauheim, we had some super fans who came up and they met us after the bus and they were, giving us a big speech about how they want to move up. And I had to get it all translated to me afterwards. But, in the moment you could tell that they were pretty upset at the way things were going and they just wanted us to play better. So there's definitely an element of pressure, but throughout the season, because we were doing so well, it just everything seemed easy.
I mean, German fans in general, especially hockey, I would say, like they have that because Germany, obviously, soccer is the #1 sport. So these guys have that same
Mm-hmm.
aspect of being fans in terms of, the drums, the loudness, but they bleed their team's colors, and it really means the world to them when they can win. And when they lose, you really feel, and probably a blessing for you in disguise that you didn't know what they were
Yeah,
saying or writing,
yeah,
because then it's
yeah,
just another day. But
100%.
No, and two, to be honest, like, I was in Selb obviously last year. So like watching you guys in the playoffs, like you definitely had some injuries, and it's just kind of one of those things where, and we've said it so many times in hockey, like as good as a team is or as bad as a team has a season, if you have luck as
Hmm.
well as, getting hot at the right time, that's what you need to win. Um, so obviously for you guys, you kind of had some bad luck there with injuries, but still a good year. They're having a good year this year as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, so like what kind of led you to do a change of scenery this year? You're obviously in Glasgow now in the USHL with my buddy Bryce, but how did that opportunity come about, and how have been things for you so far?
Yeah. It's when I absolutely loved my time in Castle last year. I really wanted to go back and try to piece together another championship with them this season, but ultimately they ended up going another route, I think, like you said, because they have four import spots. Teams are kind of divided on what they want to do, if they want to use an import spot on a goalie or if they want to use four players, and Castle ended up going with four import spot players. That's just the way that it goes sometimes. And then there are just no other jobs available in Germany. As you know, jobs get taken up over there kind of in November, December of the year before. So there's not much in terms of goalies going around when the summer comes. So by the time we were done, pretty much everything was locked up. There wasn't really much available there. And I was kind of just waiting around, kind of honestly seeing what was going to come around. And then yeah, Jason here, Morgie, he was in Heilbronn last year with that group. And just like you said, he kind of always had issues when they played me. I always played pretty well against them, and he liked the way that I played. So I got a call in the middle of the summer just asking what my plan was, and I told him that I didn't have anything going on, and he's like, "Well, we'd love to have you if you're available." And I'd heard a lot of really good things about this league here in the EI. Heard a lot of really good things about Glasgow in general, and just ended up one thing leading to another. Morgie gave me a contract and ended up here. So, but everything's going great so far. I love Scotland. The league is really really fun. Like it's really good competition. Pretty comparable to the Dell 2. Maybe even a little bit more skill here and there. And it's just it's a fun league. It's different because I've never played in a league where the regular season championship means more than the playoff championship, and that's how it is here. They do it more like soccer or football. Um, so it's kind of interesting on that each game means so much, and that if you start to slip a little bit, things can kind of go sideways for you. So it's fun navigating that, but everything's been really fun so far. Glasgow's a great city.
It is a little different there with that kind of like trophy style
Hmm.
structure. I have some friends from England who are football fans, and it's funny explaining to them. Like I try to explain to them, well, hardest thing to win in sports is Stanley Cup and the playoffs or this and this, and they're like, no, because you have 4 out of 7 games you got to win. Where in in English football, for example,
Hmm.
you play every team twice during the
Hmm.
year. So if you slip up during one of them, like you could lose your championship out because, as you said, it is just about the placement. So
Yep. Hmm.
it's a cool,
Exactly.
different atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, it is 100%. And the fans too, just like you said in Germany, like they have their kind of that football atmosphere. They take it into the rink. It's the same thing here. Everybody cares about the team. Everybody's passionate about winning. Um, you know, rinks are buzzing over here. It's a lot of fun. European hockey is a different beast, but it's awesome when you're able to kind of travel, see the world a little bit, and play hockey at the same time.
Have you been doing a lot of traveling?
Uh when I was in Germany last year, I probably didn't get around as much as I wanted to. But since we've been up here, we've been able to get around Scotland a little bit. Like we went up north for when we had a couple days off, been able to get to Edinburgh. Shay and I had some family in town a couple weeks ago. She was traveling kind of all over the country. She went to Northern Ireland when we played in Belfast, and so we're kind of just doing all of our stuff over here. But we want to at the end of the season, we're hoping to get around to like a little southern trip, maybe Spain or Italy or Greece or something like that. It's just easy when everything's so accessible here.
I tell everybody that, like, just get over there, and then like
Yeah.
you have so many options of like getting places, whether it's by train, by bus, by
Mhm.
air. Like it's so cheap. So
Yeah.
and definitely enjoy it because this doesn't his career doesn't last forever,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I'm curious. So how long, like, have you ever thought about like how long you plan on playing for? Not saying that you're old by any means, but
Yeah.
some people it's, I want to do a couple years and then I'm good, and others are like, I'm just taking it year by year and hopefully play as long as I want.
Yeah, yeah, I'm basically on that year by year, just see what happens. It's hockey, something it can give a lot to you, it can take a lot away from you. Honestly, ever since my knees happened, I've just felt fortunate to be able to play every single day because I don't think many people, like my doctors included, thought that I'd be able to play at the level I'm at now. Um, so just being able to play even, in different professional leagues, I just feel happy to be able to play day by day. So whenever it comes to an end for me, it's going to come to an end. Just a believer in whatever happens, happens. Just try to work as hard as I can throughout the whole process and let everything work itself out in the end. Um, but yeah, it's cool to be able to share these experiences with Shay. We got our two dogs over here, so we're able to take them out and let them rip around Scotland, which is always pretty fun. And just kind of see what happens this year and then go from there.
A good stress-free mindset to have, I'd say. And
You know.
obviously having your dogs with you, that's important because they're if you have a
Yep.
bad day at the office, you come home, they're wagging their tails, just waiting for you. It takes
Yep.
everything away.
Yep.
Have you thought about life after? Like what you'd want to do whenever the time comes?
Yeah, yeah. To be honest with you, I got no idea. Got no idea. I try to think about it all the time, just in case something happens and tomorrow's my last day of hockey. Try to think about what you want to do, but I got no clue. Could be I've thought about, sports management of some kind, trying to get. I don't think I would ever want to be a coach. I think that's I've just never I've never really had too much enjoyment out of goalie coaching. And maybe if it was for a team, it'd be a little bit different. But I just respect coaches a lot because they put in long hours every single day, clipping video and getting ready for the next day. So I don't know if that's something for me, but kind of more the management side of, maybe contract negotiations, salary cap, stuff like that. I got my degree in finance when I was at Clarkson. So I have a lot of interest in numbers and the way that numbers play into sports performance and stuff like that. So maybe something in that field, or just go back to Minneapolis and try to get into something in finance, business, banking, something like that. Because that's my dad did pretty well for himself when he was in business, and I always respected the way that he went about his work. So trying to get into something like he did would be pretty fun.
Well, for a guy having no clue, I mean, you sure have a lot of ideas. So
I got a lot of ideas. I just gotta hone them in on one thing now.
I
That's
was gonna,
all.
I was gonna, I was gonna joke too. I was gonna like, well, or you could just be a stay-at-home dog dad, and it's Shay's turn to take over and be the moneymaker. Now
I
you've
know
taken her on all
exactly.
these
I
journeys.
know. I know. After all of this, because they have some pretty good female leagues all across Europe. I was like, if I want to retire and you can make some good money somewhere, like I'd be happy to follow you somewhere too if you want to. And she was like, no, you still got time left. You got to keep playing.
She's like, no, I'm good. Like the
Yeah.
system we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, but hey, stay at home dog dad, that wouldn't be too bad.
That's the goal.
Mhm.
Not realistic for me, but maybe for you down the road. I'm holding out for you. But
All right. All right. Appreciate it.
two more for you. You've been very
Yep.
generous with your time tonight. Obviously,
Well,
let you
you're
go enjoy
good.
some time with your fiance and your two dogs. But how I guess I would say, and where like do you spend your summers, your off season? Obviously, you mentioned early that I believe you have a wedding. Your wedding is this summer,
Mhm.
or coming up in the future. So I'm sure you're
Yep.
planning for that. But what else do
Yep.
you do in the summer? Where do you spend it?
Yeah. So we usually home base for us is in Minnesota. We're just in Minneapolis, just outside in Eden Prairie. We're still staying in my hometown. And then we'll go up to Owen Sound. Shay's from Owen Sound, which is about 2.5 hours north of Toronto. Obviously, you know that. So we'll spend some time up there with her family as well. So we kind of just go back and forth and just try to enjoy our time together. She was extremely busy last year. She wasn't able to come with me to Germany, but she was teaching. That's what she's gotten into now. She got her master's in education a couple of years ago, and she um she was teaching sixth, seventh, and eighth science, and then high school chemistry. So she was extremely busy last year. And so then when she got off, we just tried to enjoy our summers together. We love just being outdoors, being with our dogs, doing fun stuff, being around family. She's got a lot of family in Minnesota too, so that makes it kind of fun when we're able to get together with everybody and just have some quality family time.
I'm gonna have to ask her when she gets on, like, where the hell is Shallow Lake? Like, that is just
Yeah. She says she's from Owen Sound because she's like, if I ever say Shell Lake, people are gonna be like, where is that?
I was just looking at it and I'm like, God, I'm from Ontario and I have no idea where that
Oh,
is.
you would never know. It's a town of probably, I don't know, collectively 5,000, 10,000 people just outside Owen Sound.
It's a good question for her. Maybe ask her when her her statue's coming, because obviously, she'd be one of few famous people from
I know. She had a couple of her helmets over the years at the museum up in Owen Sound for a little bit because they had a big showcase up there for some of the PWHPA teams a couple years ago, and she had her helmets in that museum up there in Owen Sound. They made a pretty big deal out of it because she is a pretty big deal. So
Good answer. She might listen to this, so I'm happy you're saying that.
yeah, just clip that one part and send it
Yeah,
to her.
yeah. That'll be the main thing on when I post it. It's a pretty big deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, last one for you. I like to always end on this one. It's cool to hear people's
Mm.
kind of thoughts. What is one piece of advice, or maybe multiple if you have multiple, that you would give your younger self? So if you're speaking to Jay
Oh,
Kielly at
yeah.
15, 16, 17 years old, or you can also attach it to if you're speaking to the younger generation. So
Yeah.
kids growing up at that age, like what are one or multiple pieces of advice you would give them?
Yeah. So to kids now, play multiple sports. I do some goalie coaching in the summertime, and when I hear kids, they say that they do like private goalie coaching in the morning, then they come and do this like group skate in the afternoon, and then they have like their STP program or something in the afternoon, and it's like it's June. I'm like, man, get outside, enjoy some enjoy some warm weather, go play baseball, go to do lacrosse, go play football. Who cares? Just do something else. Put down the gear for a couple months. If you want to like work out for hockey, do that. But put the gear away, do something every once in a while, but don't make it a 24/7 job because you'll burn out before you leave high school. And to my younger self, just I wish I would have been less stubborn. I was very stubborn and just very kind of self-conceited at that age. I thought that I was kind of the best thing to walk on water, so I didn't want to train. Um, I trained really hard in terms of like strength training. That was always something that I did really well. But for a goalie, I didn't stretch nearly as much as I should have. Never stretched, never focused on my flexibility, my mobility. And it's something that's kind of killing me now. It's something that I'm trying to work through, and I'm 27, trying to make myself more flexible. You can imagine how that's going, but I wish that I could tell myself, I'd slap myself around a little bit and say that you need to do that, and then watch a lot of NHL goalies. Just try to learn as much as you can, soak in as much as you can. I wasn't a huge hockey nerd when I was growing up. I didn't love watching hockey games. But if you just watch some of the greats do it, man, it's fun. Like I get a great enjoyment now watching the good goalies in the league who are able to play. I'm fortunate enough to skate with a couple of them in the summertime, and it's awesome to be able to get out there with them and stuff. But watch hockey a lot and train hard. Those are probably the two things I got. Have fun with it. You know, at the end of the day, hockey's a game. Should feel fortunate every single day to be able to play something you love, and you know, at the end of the day, it's just a game. So just keep chugging along and do what you got to do.
And don't forget to stretch.
And
Um,
don't forget to stretch, man. It's crazy. I kick myself every single day that I wasn't better about that when I was younger. I thought because I could touch my toes, I was flexible, but I was probably the least flexible person of all time. I just got lanky limbs. That's why I could touch my toes.
it's funny what we learn, 15 years later and look
Yeah.
back. But
Yeah.
no, man, good advice. The multiple sports one we talked about earlier, and just yeah, like enjoying the experience, appreciate what you're doing.
Mm.
So many people get caught up in thinking about the next step and putting more pressure on themselves instead of enjoying that moment, whether it's in minor hockey, going to tournaments, junior, with the guys every day, college, the bond that you create there.
Yeah.
Um, College especially, like I've talked to many people and they've agree with me when I say this, but I think it's fake life for like
Mhm.
3 to 4 years, because
It is.
you're going to school. That's probably your third priority because the first is your sport, the second is probably partying, and then maybe 3.5 is girls, or if you're a
Yeah,
girl, then hang out with guys or whatever it
yeah,
is, and then school is just there because it's like, oh, I
mhm,
guess I got to do something in the morning. But
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's something you
It's
look back on and you're like, man, I wish I not to say I wish I like drank more, but like I
yeah,
wish like I just hadn't realized that these moments were so special and that there's
mhm.
nothing like pro hockey's great, but it's nothing like college.
No, college it's special. It was special. Like you're just around your best friends all day long. And then, I was fortunate, like Nico, I lived with him for 3 years, all 3 years. Another buddy I got playing right now in the KHL, Devin Brosseau, he lived with us for 3 years. Like those are two of my best friends that I have. Another one of my best buddies right now, like lives in Edmonton. He's playing in Finland right now. He lived a 2 minute walk away from my house, so I could just walk over there, see what he was doing. But these are guys that I FaceTime with all the time, text them all the time, see how they're doing. And it's just like you build these bonds away from the rink and away from the ice, and you go through stuff in the classroom and on weekends and stuff, and you got these stories for life. And it's just fun to, have your best friends all around you all the time.
I agree, man. Good times and take me back. But I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I said, it's time to wrap this up now. A lot of great advice from you. It was cool hearing
Mhm.
your story. I'll be following you this year, obviously, now that we kind of
Yeah.
know each other and obviously through Bryce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's gonna be a lot of big things from you this year.
Yeah.
If you guys have success, you'll be a big part of it, obviously. So,
Yeah.
I wish you all the best. I'm gonna get your fiance on next,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
text more about that. I need some
All
good
right.
questions. Some.
Okay. Okay.
But
I
yeah, I
got you.
appreciate you doing it, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate it, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Anytime. And yeah, for those listening, give us a follow. If you got any questions for future guests, feel free to write them in. Anyone you think also should come on, check us out on YouTube as well so you can see these podcasts live. And until next week, juice and chow.